Good evening. Welcome everyone to the City Council meeting for Tuesday, November the 5th. Ms. Hilbrick, will you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Councilman De La Garza?
I am present.
Councilman Kidder?
Here.
Councilwoman Butler?
Present.
Councilwoman Scott?
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Young?
Here.
Councilman Lofgren?
Here.
And Mayor Crocker.
Here. If you would, please stand, join me for the pledges, followed by a moment of silence. Thank you. Please be seated. Again, welcome everyone. Good to have a packed house on a election Tuesday. We will jump straight into our agenda. Item B1 is announcements and reminders. Mr. Garza, good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I do have a few announcements for you this evening. We'd like to remind the public that all non-emergency city offices will be closed on Monday, November 11th in observance of Veterans Day. Offices will reopen at 8 a.m. on Tuesday, November 12th. Trash, yard waste, and recycling scheduled for Monday will be collected as usual, and our Victoria Public Library will be closed on Monday and reopen at 9 a.m. on Tuesday. On behalf of the Parks Department, we'd like to invite our residents to the ribbon cutting for the improvements of Bronson Park during Toddlers on the Trail on Wednesday, November 13th at 9 a.m. Our staff will also be planting a tree in recognition of Arbor Day, which was this past week, and we will have cake in honor of the park's birthday. That park was open on November 9th, 1965, so that park will be turning 59 years young, and we're excited that we were able to improve it and enhance its amenities right before the big 6-0 next year for the park. Additionally, we'd like to invite our community seniors to join us at the Community Center Annex on Tuesday, November 12th from 1 to 3 p.m. for an exciting time of bingo. This program is free and open to all seniors. Prizes, giveaways, and complimentary refreshments will be provided for those that attend, and we invite our seniors to bring a friend and join us for a chance to win and just have a great time.
Mr. Garza, what is
Yes.
the city definition of a senior?
I'm not going to answer that question. I leave that to interpretation on everybody's
If you
part.
identify as a senior.
Exactly.
you.
Yes, I've answered that question before, and it has not turned out well. So I will stay away from it this time. All right. So on behalf of Environmental Services, and I'm sorry, Chrissy, if I'm stealing your thunder, but on behalf of Keep Victoria Beautiful, we want to remind our residents and volunteers about the cleanup in our original town site on South Central neighborhood, starting at the Victoria Art League on Saturday, November 9th at 9 a.m. Residents in the designated area who need help with moving heavy items to the curb for pickup can notify Environmental Services at victoriatx.gov/environmental services or by calling 361-485-3230. And that concludes my announcements.
Very good. Thank you. Notice that we have a couple of public and employee recognitions. We'll start with a Municipal Court Week proclamation. Ms. Hilbert, can you help me, please?
Yes, sir. Whereas municipal courts play a significant role in preserving public safety and promoting quality of life in Texas, whereas more people come in contact with municipal courts than all other Texas courts combined, and public impression of the Texas judicial system is largely dependent upon the public's experience in municipal court. Whereas the City of Victoria is committed to the notion that our legal system is based on the principle that an independent, fair, and competent judiciary will interpret and apply the laws that govern us, and that judges and court personnel should comply with the law and act in a manner that promotes public confidence in the integrity and impartiality of the judiciary. Whereas the Victoria Municipal Court judge is not a policymaker for the City of Victoria, but is bound by the law and the canons of judicial conduct and is required to make decisions independent of the governing body of the City of Victoria, of the City Council, city officials, and employees, whereas the City Council recognizes that the Constitution and laws of the state of Texas contain procedural safeguards in criminal cases for all defendants, including indigent defendants, and supports the City of Victoria Municipal Court in finding innovative ways to comply with such legal requirements, serving all citizens of the City of Victoria. Now therefore, I, Duane Crocker, Mayor of the City of Victoria, Texas, do hereby proclaim the week of November 4th through 8th, 2024 as Municipal Court Week in recognition of the fair and impartial justice offered to our citizens by the Municipal Court of Victoria.
Thank you very much. We take Traffic Safety Week very important, very seriously here in Victoria. Thank you for this proclamation, kind of establishing what it is we do, what we continue to do, and the people we continue to help. I appreciate all the support from our City Council and also the staff in the City of Victoria. And come by and visit us anytime. We have a lot of really great, innovative things that are going on. So I always invite you over to see what we have. Thank you.
Thank you. Then item B2B, I believe we have a presentation by Ms. Euchre for the November Keep Victoria Beautiful Beautification Award. Welcome.
Yes, thank you. Good to see you all. Echoing Mr. Garza's statement about our cleanup this weekend, it's one of our fun neighborhood cleanup events. And I'd like to say that we've already picked up 101 tires in the neighborhood already.
Wow.
So it's already a success. So please join us if you can at the Art League on Saturday. And now we are going to present our November Beautification Award, and Meredith Bird will do the honors.
Good evening, everyone. So this month's award recipient is a neighbor of yours. We are very proud to present Charlene's Gifts with the November Beautification Award. Charlene's is located just a couple of blocks away on South William Street. And if you've ever passed by it, the first thing that you notice is the immaculate yard. It's beautiful. Shrubs, green grass, blooming flowers. It's just beautiful trees. It is gorgeous just from top to bottom. And then if you go inside, it is this amazing gift shop full, like it would take you an hour to just browse inside and take in all the sights and the smells. And this is really a little gem here in downtown Victoria. Now, Charlene's has been open since 1984. She's been in business since 1984, moved to this location in 2001. And this was not her first time to be nominated. She's come up a couple of times as a nominee, and this time prevailed. And so we are proud to present the November Award to Charlene Mitchell of Charlene's Gifts. And I forgot to mention that she and, I'm forgetting his name. Did you say David? David. do all the yard work. It's really immaculate.
Thank you. I'm right here.
So there you go.
Thank you.
It's all yours.
Thank you so much for having me. I am very scared to be here. And I am my own little environment over there, and I would love for you to come. I get ready for you every day. And I'm going to continue to. I'm open every day but Sunday. And you can call me. I live there. So thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
Mr. Garza, do you have any other public and employee recognitions?
I do. Is this on? All right.
Yes.
I do have one. George always cuts me off. I want to actually take a moment to acknowledge our fire chief, Chief Gamas, if you wouldn't mind at least standing. He last week graduated from the Fire Service Chief Executive Program through TCEQ Emergency Services Training Institute and the Texas A&M Mays Business School. It's a week-long program that provides advanced level professional development to sharpen leadership skills of executives within the fire service. And as always, we are very grateful that our executive team and employees take great pride in their professional development. And so we want to acknowledge his graduation. Congratulations, Chief. Thank you. And that's it.
Very good, thank you. Moving on then, are there any items from council this evening? Nope. Then we will jump into citizens' communication. I have 3 cards, and just as a reminder, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And we will start with Ms. Wilma Edwards. Good evening, Ms. Edwards. Welcome back.
Good evening to everybody. I'm going to start with saying something you probably all want to know, already know. First, I want to say to our city manager, he is a very smart man. Please stand up. No, that's a joke.
That's better than carrying something like last time.
You haven't answered my calls, but I believe you would do what is best for our peoples. I've been calling the office and I'm not getting any response. And these are some questions. Who checks with the department and especially the code? Code enforcement. Who does that? Y'all answer all those questions yet. Did you understand what I'm saying? I know you got. I just want to know.
Code enforcement?
Yes, who's checking with those people? And even on the streets, we need people to check to see what the work has been done. See, the work is done, but you're not checking to see how well it's done. Because even the Pleasant Green, we thank you for doing Pleasant Green Drive, but if you go down there now and it's not done correctly, I don't know how you're going to do this, but it needs to be done before it get out of hand. And I have been having problems. My speech is a little bad. I've been having problems with the vacant lots. I have called and called and called. I even got to the point to tell somebody to come by and see for themselves because the grass is right where the mailbox is. Even where the transit stops, they have to move a different place further up or down because of all the grass on that lot. So that may be another rule y'all need to change because it's not right for that grass to grow that high and nobody cuts it. Okay. Now I'm going to change to something else. I don't know where my friend is back there. I think he's trying to sleep on me. Now, we're speaking about Crisis Kitchen. Can y'all hear me?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
Speaking about Crisis Kitchen, we don't need to close the building down. We don't need to close the park down. What we need to do, spend some money over there to help those people that's over there. Because they have some people over there, they're not on drugs. They're not homeless, but they go to get a good meal. And I'm going to tell you what else is happening that I need. I have a young man that I talked to over there, and he was so happy when I asked him to clean up, keep the park clean, pick up all the trash. And he was so happy because I gave him $5 just to do that. And if you go by there, he should be keeping that clean. Like I said, I gave him some little money, and I went back over there, and the man had completely changed, like he was really got to have a job. So please consider what y'all doing with Queen City over there. And if you want to, I think that's about all I'm going to say. But to the mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Edwards. We appreciate your comments.
Okay, I want you to give us $2,900. Yeah. I'm saying that right. I want y'all to give us some money. I bet I said that right. Because we have a building, they said that we could use it for the free clothes ministry, but that building needs to be remodeled. And that's serious because we've been without a building.
Well, thank you, Ms. Edwards. We appreciate you being here.
Thank you. I know it's something else I want to tell you, Mayor, but keep up. Good
Well, I'm
work.
afraid your time's up. We'll see you next time, though. How about that?
Oh, I'm so sorry. Forgive me.
Great to be here. Great to see you.
God, forgive me. You forgive me.
You're fine. Next card I have is Ms. Deborah Reed. Good evening, Ms. Reed.
I'm here because I don't know where else to go. I moved to this city a year ago in a townhouse complex on Chantilly off of Guy Grant. I bought a property that's next to a property that has a carport enclosed into a garage. I thought I'd be able to do that on mine. City told me no, they wouldn't give me a permit. It's not platted for it, but there are 3 garages in that complex. They said they'd have to take those down. Year went by, nothing got done. I said, fine, let me just enclose mine. My neighbor, who is of a different worldview than I am, called the police, called the city, got it red tagged. I've spent the last month talking to lawyers' offices. They say we don't know what to do. The original plat says no carports. I don't want anybody's carport torn down. I went down, talked to Eli, talked to Rick a year ago, talked to Eli October 3rd. He says, let me see about a variance. Then he calls me the next day and says, no variance because this is a self-created hardship. Yes, aging is a self-created hardship. I simply want a garage for safety and security. Every morning, I hear my neighbor's garage door go up. She goes off to work. Garage door goes down, and I'm sitting there going, why can't I get a garage? I don't know what to do. I don't want to get in trouble with the city. They've told me they won't give me a variance. They've been very kind. I don't mean to mean like they haven't been, but it's like, no, you may not do this. But they haven't done anything about anybody else's, and my complex is not the only one with garages behind townhouses. I've seen some others in town. So I don't know what to do at this point, except I thought I would come and tell y'all about my situation because I didn't think it could hurt anything. I turned 71 this month. I'm not getting any younger. I'd like to have some safety and security, but I don't know how to go about getting it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Reed. We appreciate your comments. And certainly I would stay in touch with Development Services and keep talking with those folks, and perhaps they can help you out. I appreciate it. All right, next card I have is Michael Vondera. Good evening, Mr. Vondera.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Michael Vondro. I live at 2204 East North Street. It's Victoria Oaks trailer park. I feel I've been illegally evicted by the general manager and the trailer park owner. And the trailer park owner is a famous personal injury lawyer and stuff, and I feel he's taking advantage of poor folks and people that's not poor. And what they do is if they don't like you, they illegally evict you without writing you up. On my letter, it says I owe $0, and it doesn't give a reason, and it has the general manager's not signature, but just her name. Before it has legal, they have to give a reason, and they have to give a signature and stuff. You know, unless there's a signature, you know, something is fishy, you know. And I don't like that they're not taking care of their trailer park, and I feel I'm being retaliated by they're evicting me because I'm retaliating because I complained to maybe the city council, and the reason I do is they're not doing their job. He don't have no money to fix the trailer park, but he's got money to buy another trailer park in Victoria, and it's just nothing but mud right now. It rains. Instead of filling the potholes with gravel or asphalt, they just fill it with mud and sand and stuff. And a lot of times they don't tell you how much you owe because you don't know how much the water bill is, and she won't tell you how much, so you got to guess it, and you might pay too much or you don't pay enough, you know. And this has been going on for a long time, and sometimes you pay on time and you get these 60-day notices to vacate. And you know they're not bluffing when they actually give you a date to move. And as of December the 23rd, 2024, I'm being evicted, and I don't even know what I did wrong. And I feel the trailer park owner and the trailer park general manager is retaliating, and I don't appreciate it at all. You know, they're violating state laws, they're violating federal laws, the Fair Housing Act and stuff, and even texting, she still refuses to tell me why I'm evicted. And something needs to be done at that trailer park at Victoria Oaks. It's very unfair and it's unprofessionally ran. That's my right to express my opinion. Thanks and have a good day. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Von Der Rohe. That then will conclude citizens' communication. I don't believe we have any items with public hearings, so we will move to the consent agenda.
Item D1 is the adoption of minutes of the regular meeting held on October 15th, 2024. Item D2 is a resolution approving the payment of TCEQ annual consolidated water quality assessment fee for the wastewater treatment plants in the amount of $114,324.67. Item D3 is a resolution awarding a contract to Third Coast Services LLC for the Airline Road and Main Street traffic pole and mast arm project for their competitive sealed proposal in the amount of $86,041.92. Item D4 is a resolution approving the citywide uniform rental services agreement with UniFirst Corporation in the amount of $124,015.32 for a 3-year period. Item D5 is a resolution approving the renewal of an annual supply contract with Colorado Materials LTD for the limestone-based material in the amount of $295,280. Item D6 is a resolution approving an agreement with Texas Department of Motor Vehicles to access Texas motor vehicle records data. Item D7 is a resolution approving the purchase of Axon body-worn cameras for a total of $93,711.58. Item D8 is a resolution approving the purchase of 2 Lucas 3 chest compression devices from Stryker for the Victoria Fire Department in an amount of $52,868.68.
Thank you, Ms. Hilberg. I'll entertain any motions with respect to the consent agenda.
Motion to approve consent agenda?
I'll second.
We've got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda passes. We will move then to our action items. Item E1.
Item E1 is a resolution approving a renewal contract with the current stop-loss carrier Sun Life Financial in the amount of $802,550.
All right, so I get the honor of introducing our key presenter for this item. Many of you have met Morgan Young, who is our primary representative with Lockton, who's our benefits consultant. She couldn't be here this evening, and so in her place, April Hernandez, who's another vice president with Lockton, is joining us, and she will walk you through a little bit of a stop-loss 101, as well as the specifics around this renewal.
Good evening, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, City Council members. Thank you for that introduction as well. Oops,
Can you get a little bit closer to the mic?
I apologize. I think I got a little bit ahead of myself there.
We won't tell anybody.
Thank you so much. So we are here this evening to discuss the stop-loss renewal with Sun Life. I'm sorry. Perfect. Thank you. So first, we're going to briefly discuss what is stop-loss insurance. So stop-loss insurance limits the city's self-funded health plan liability to a specified amount for each claimant. This insurance protects the financial integrity of the self-funded plan. The city's current stop-loss with Sun Life Financial includes an individual stop-loss deductible of $175,000 and a 48/12 paid contract term. The current paid contract term provides reimbursement for any eligible claims over $175,000. Claims can be incurred in the last 48 months during which the member was eligible on the plan, and they must be paid within the policy 12-month term of the plan. Every year upon renewal with the incumbent stop-loss carrier, an additional 12 months of incurred protection is added at no additional cost. This adds an additional layer of protection to the city for high-cost claims risk. See if I can get this right. There we go, perfect. Now, this slide reviews your stop-loss plan performance for 2022, 2023, and the current year to date. This represents large claims through September 30th of 2024. In 2022, the loss ratio from a stop-loss perspective was 5%. There were 2 claimants that had breached the specific deductible. In 2023, there were 4 claimants that had breached the specific deductible. That was a much higher loss ratio at 91%. Thus far, with claims through September, the plan performance, there is only 1 claimant that has breached the stop-loss level of $175,000. Now, there is a note, Sun Life has provided a firm stop-loss renewal offer with claims liability through July. If another stop-loss vendor is selected, the city must provide claims through September, which have not been as favorable. From a summary perspective, again, the current contract type, it's a $175,000 individual deductible. It's a 4812 paid contract. Specific coverage only, it covers your medical and RX prescription drug claims that are run through the plan. Currently, there's a 39% rate cap with no new lasers at renewal in place. We did market the stop loss and received some bids. However, those bids have expired. The Sun Life renewal is firm, so that one is firm. The other options have expired. Now, the renewal recommendation rationale as far as renewing with Sun Life. Sun Life's renewal is going to renew at a 60-12 contract term, which allows for claims incurred from January 1st of 2021 through December 31st of 2025 and paid in the 2025 policy year to be eligible for reimbursement. It's not uncommon for large claims to be incurred multiple years prior to being paid. This is due to lengthy inpatient stays. They tend to have delayed billing and audits, which could cross over into plan and contract years. There has also been an increase in the large claim audits where a claim incurred in a few years prior is audited and reprocessed and then paid under the current stop-loss policy period. So again, every year that a policyholder renews with the incumbent, the contract will mature for an additional 12 months of protection, which is why it's going from 48 months to 60 months if you renew with Sun Life, which is the recommendation. Now, the appendix goes into detail as far as what the costs are for your current plan with Sun Life, the renewal with Sun Life, which is actually going 5% under your current costs, and then the 3 options that we had that were competitive. And again, the Sun Life offer is firm based on claims through July. They're not requesting any additional claims data for that renewal to be firm. And if another stop-loss vendor is selected, we must provide additional claims data through September for them to firm up their offer, and those claims have not been as favorable. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, April. Appreciate it. I'll only add a couple of sentiments here that I think are important for council to keep in mind as you just wrap your head around, stop loss and whatnot. But stop loss, as you've learned, right, is basically ebbs and flows depending on the number of high claimants that we have, right? And so that obviously brings to attention the health of the folks that are covered in our plan. It could potentially lead to conversations about, well, what kind of wellness initiatives do we have to try and sort of potentially catch things earlier versus them getting to a more severe state, right? So there's a lot of things that we can possibly do a little bit more proactively to try and mitigate high claimants just in general moving forward. And so that's something that we'll look at doing, because it's something that we'll have to start looking at simply because of the cost of the stop loss insurance. And so, for example, the renewal in front of you is at $182,000. As was mentioned, slightly less than the $107,000 that was the case for 2024. But just 5 years ago, in 2020, that was $576,000. In 2018, it was $488,000. And so this is one of those items that goes up, and at least in the last 7 years has gone up. And we pay for this out of our health insurance fund. And so we've talked about how we've built up a reserve for our health insurance fund over the years. And it's important to note that this expense comes out of the fund directly. And so as this expense potentially goes up in the foreseeable future, it obviously impacts the health of the fund balance and the health fund, since that's where it comes from. And so I just think it's important that we all understand how it's all connected, where the money comes from, and things of that sort. And so with that, we're happy to answer any questions that you might have.
It's me. It's always me.
Oh, you're fine.
I have three questions because I looked through this ahead of time and they're simply because I want to understand. How do we project potential high-cost claims for 2025 when we're looking at a policy that covers that timeframe? There was a note regarding the 5% in reduction of the total fixed costs. What are the main reasons for this reduction? I saw as you went through the slide, there was a piece where it talked about composite costs. And then lastly, will this renewal have any impact on employee premium rates or out-of-pocket expenses for claims?
Yes, so great questions. Thank you so much. April, Ms. Butler. So let me go back to that one slide. So what's your initial question regarding as far as projections? So we do have an actuarial team that looks at your current high-cost claimants, and they run kind of analysis to see what the estimated projections are based on each claimant going into subsequent plan years. Again, those are their best guess estimates based on the claim data that we do receive from the carrier. So that's how we project forward going into 2025 and 2026. And going into why is it going down, right? That's great news. Actually, your fixed costs are going down. It's like, wait a minute, why? Well, because when we're looking at 2022 and 2023, the historical plan performance, as you can see in 2022, your loss ratio was 5%, and in 2023, you were at 91%. So when you put all those together, it's an average cumulative loss ratio of 48%, which is nice and low. So we were able to negotiate a reduction. And we also had some competitive options as well to go back to Sun Life and negotiate a reduction.
And then the last question was.
Lastly,
employee,
is
yeah.
there any impact on employee premium rates or out-of-pocket expenses for claims?
Yes, so when we do projections early for 2025, so that was based on an estimated stop-loss amount, and this is actually lower than what was estimated. So this is good news as well.
I'm sure there's lots of employees that will be happy about that too.
Well, I don't believe
We hope so.
the rates are changing based on that because the budget rates for 2025 are already set.
Okay.
Right, and
Correct.
so,
Yep.
and so that's why I mentioned that the payment for stop loss comes from the health insurance fund, because we don't have a direct link between the cost of stop loss and premiums.
Okay.
Got it. Any other questions?
Thank you for those, Ms. Butler. We appreciate them. Several of us might
Sorry.
have had the same ones.
Good.
Very good. Thank you for your presentation. I appreciate it.
Thank
So
you all
with-
for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
So with that then, I will entertain any motions with respect to item E1.
Motion to approve item E1.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, item E1 passes. Then we move on to item E2.
Item E2 is a resolution approving a professional services agreement with Texas Land and Right-of-Way Company LLC in the amount of $331,254 for easement acquisition services for water and sanitary sewer improvements along I-69 corridor.
Good evening, Mayor, Council.
Good evening.
Tonight, we will discuss contract for easement acquisition services along the I-69 corridor. The I-69 corridor we're discussing, it runs from the south at 185, Highway 185, and Highway 59, going north to Hill Road and Highway 59. It has been identified that the utilities, the water and sewer utilities along this corridor are critical to the ultimate development and build-out along this area. There are utilities along this stretch, but they are not continuous. They have been constructed and developed to serve certain developments that have come in those areas, but some of the vacant areas still do not have the water and the sewer on their frontage. Preliminary engineering was performed to study this area to see what it was going to take, and it identified approximately 29 utility easements that would be required for the construction of the water and the sewer lines. And acquisition of these easements was part of the budget for the fiscal year 2025 CIP. With numerous property owners, it was determined that it would be involving a third-party real estate agent to assist us in the negotiations and contacts with these property owners would facilitate this project moving forward. Last February, we put out a request for qualifications, asking for statements of qualifications from real estate firms that are experienced in this sort of activity. From those firms and applicants that we received, we created a pool after scoring them. We began negotiations with Texas Land and Right-of-Way Company out of Gonzales back in August, and come upon an agreement for services contract in the amount not to exceed $331,254. In that contract, Texas Land and Right-of-Way will provide the following services. They would provide all the title research to determine the ownership of the properties involved. They will actually contact these landowners and obtain right of entry agreements from landowners for survey purposes. They will also establish the value of the proposed easements. And they will negotiate with these property owners for these easements, properties. Once those negotiations have been completed with those owners, then they will draft the legal documents and also provide for the recordation in the county clerk's office of these easement documents. Does anyone have any questions?
No, I would just comment that Ms. Lacy and I had a discussion about the contract because I wanted to make sure that the scope of the services included encroachment agreements with any existing easements that may be there, and I understand that it does, correct?
Correct, yes, sir. And we actually reached out to the contractor this morning, and he has provided us with an addendum just to clarify that that is in fact included in the contract itself. So they will be handling that for us.
Very good, because that can end up being a whole different animal.
I assume you have experience with that.
And by the way, he's
I'd like,
here.
quite frankly.
Yes.
Yeah, if you want to introduce him.
Renee. With us tonight is Renee De La Garza, President of Texas Land and Right-of-Way Company. If you have any questions for him, I'm sure he'll be happy to answer.
Great. Mr. De La Garza, welcome. Anybody have any other questions?
I know you're looking at me, but I got them all answered ahead of time, so we're good.
Very good.
I'll only add that our fiscal year 25 budget also includes funds for the design of the utility improvements. And so the idea was to, in parallel, go through this exercise of acquiring the easements, designing the work, so that come fiscal year 26, we can start a phased approach at the actual construction aspect of it.
Very good. Thank you. Well, with that then, I will entertain any motions with respect to item E2.
I move we adopt.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Item E2 passes, and we move on to city managers' reports. Mr. Garza.
All right, so we have two city manager reports for you this evening. The first is by the one and only Daryl Lesak.
The one and only. I kind of like that introduction. I get that every time. So I was up here a couple weeks ago, last month, and we talked about the need to put our landfill out to bid. Contract's coming up. It ends in 2027. And so I told you at that time I would be back and we'd have a little more in-depth discussion. And so Christy's actually going to do part of the presentation tonight. I'm going to cover kind of where we're at and what we've learned. And then Christy's going to take over and she's going to talk about next steps. Am I hitting it too fast? All right, so we're going to talk about the background. So the city developed a landfill in the 1980s. We ran it through the early 1990s. And in 1993, we put it out to bid and we hired a company, some of you may remember, called Browning Ferris or BFI. They operated the landfill until 2005, 2006. We started having some issues with them. And so we made the decision at that time to bid the landfill out again. Republic Services won the landfill at that time. And they've been there since 2007, and they've done a really good job for us. Then in 2010, we decided we needed a compost facility, and we hired Gardenville or Texas Disposal Systems, doing business as Gardenville, to operate our compost facility, which is right next to the landfill. Also in 2010, we bid out and hired, at that time, Mass Energy to develop a landfill gas plant and sell gas. And we've been doing that since 2012 because it just took a little while to get a contractor. But when it's all said and done, we have 3 facilities. The landfill gas facility is actually within the landfill, and the compost facility is adjacent to the landfill. And so we're standing here and we're looking at, okay, in 2027, this 20-year contract is going to come to an end. And so what I'm going to talk about tonight is things we've learned and what we want to do in the future to get something in place before this contract expires in 2027. So my favorite thing to talk about, environmental law. Actually, it's not, but so TCEQ regulations change frequently. We've grown, our landfill has grown really quickly. Remember, we're the only one within 125 miles of Victoria. So it doesn't necessarily apply to the growth of the city of Victoria or even Victoria County. It's the 5 or 7 counties around us make a big difference in our landfill volumes. And so with the growth over the last 17 years, larger landfill, unfortunately, more environmental regulations. And then now, because of the size of our landfill, we fall under a new rule, which is the NSPS rule, which is New Source Performance Standards. So in the past, where we've worried about gas escaping underground, we've worried about water, having contaminated water in or around the landfill, and that's all captured in probes, which I'll talk about shortly. We now have to worry about what gas may be leaking out of the top of the landfill. So quarterly, it has to be tested. They walk around with these little machines, and then any emissions we have to try and fix. So with that, I'm gonna jump over and talk a little bit about gas probes. And so that's a gas probe. It's kind of a diagram, maybe kind of hard to see, but essentially it's a hole drilled in the ground about 60 feet. It's filled with gravel. There's a piece of PVC that's vented that runs down there. There's a valve at the top, and you check the gas around the perimeter of the landfill to make sure that gas is not reaching the perimeter or leaving our property. Where the landfill's located, it's clay, black gumbo, but then when you get down deep enough, it's sand, and gas will take the path of least resistance. Sand is not a lot of resistance, so it will travel. The reason we have a gas plant is to suck that gas and keep it from reaching the perimeter. So unfortunately, we get audited from time to time. TCEQ came in and did a quick audit. They audited just a couple of the valves, and we had some issues. So I worked with Republic and Hydrex to identify issues, and unfortunately, we have issues with all 18 of our wells, of our probes. And so we're gonna have to do some work on those. And so we developed a plan, we sent it to TCEQ. They approved the plan, sent it back to us in August. We have 180 days to do the work. It's gonna cost about $128,000, so please don't go crazy yet. I'll get to that part. But we have the money. That's the reason we have a closure, post-closure fund, is for things like this. These were put in when the landfill was developed in the 80s, so we're not surprised. But we're gonna put things in place to make sure that we're keeping an eye on them in our future contracts to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And actually, it is the city's responsibility, not the contractors, based off the current contracts. So with that, I'm gonna jump back. Okay, so other lessons that were learned is original contract ambiguity. I'm sure some of you have done contracts and then you go back and you think, man, I wish I'd have put that in there. Or in our case, where you have multiple contracts, they're not covered in any of the contracts, or they're covered in all of the contracts, but in a different way. And so we want to go back and look at overlapping responsibilities and clarify what those are. We want to look at the landfill gas monitoring and perimeter probes. One thing I didn't mention, I do want to mention, is on the probes, when we put those back, we're actually taking in a new part of the landfill where we'll have the class 1. Those are probes we'd have to do in the future. We've incorporated them into now, so we don't have to come back in the future and do that. So once we get everything set on the class 1, we're ready to go. And then leachate, landfill, gas, condensate. Essentially, same thing. Way the contracts look at it, totally different. Gas company looks at it one way, landfill looks at it another way, TCEQ looks at it a different way. And then cell construction for the class 1. That's new and not in the current contract. If I'm going too fast, stop me. Okay, so just to recap what's changed, increase in landfill capacity. We went from 20 years to 100 years. We added 144 acres of life to the landfill. We got approved the class 1 non-hazardous waste acceptance. We had the addition to the landfill gas contract, but in doing that, we added a lot more gas wells because the goal here is to produce gas and sell it. So the more wells we have, the more gas we produce, the more money we make. The NSPS, that is something that unfortunately due to size, we've had to take on, and it increases inspections and reporting of all the above ground wells, and it increases costs because we're actually paying someone to go out and do these surveys to make sure that we are in compliance. And then, of course, the addition of the compost facility. And why wouldn't you look at all these things since they're right there together? It's one unit, and how they would work together in the future, and not as separate entities. And so with that, I'm going to move to the next slide. I'm going to sit down, but I'll be here for questioning and let Christy take over.
Okay, hello again, Council and Mayor. All right, so where are we going from here? We obviously want to take all these things into consideration when we're looking at a new contract for the landfill and all of its operations. So clearly, we want one that's sound environmentally and also fiscally beneficial for the city. And the reasons for this, obviously, is cost-effective waste management is the first one. So this would include rates, responsibilities, any incurred costs from those responsibilities and who's responsible. The other reason, clearly, is future revenue generation. This is important because it's money for this community, for this city. And that includes the tipping fees, it includes the landfill gas, and coming on class 1 waste, which will really help us out there. The third thing, also very important, is environmental stewardship. With the sound contract, we'll be able to improve air quality, contribute to managing our water resources more responsibly, and also with renewable energy production and reuse with the compost facility and landfill gas. All of those are important things to have done right in contracts moving forward. And of course, enhanced livability. Also, a sound contract would allow us to contribute to a sustainable future for this community and long-term economic benefits. So how do we do that? So having the right experience will help us to anticipate things. So ensuring we have a proper team in place is important to get this right. And there's two parts to this. The first one is the legal team. And some of you may recall that in the past, we've worked with Lloyd Gosling on anything related to the landfill, any contracts associated with that. Lloyd Gosling is now working with Republic on their end of this, so obviously that's not going to happen. So we were referred to Jackson Walker out of Austin, another experienced environmental legal team, and they're going to work on this process. We've also asked them to look at the procurement process just to make sure we're in compliance and meeting all the requirements there on procurement. So the next part of this is working with a solid waste consultant group that will work on these last pieces, developing the request for proposals. This has to include, as Daryl was just explaining, was the integrated waste operations that happen at that landfill. It's not one thing. And people think, oh, that's where you take the trash. Well, it's a lot more than that. There's a lot more involved. So having these seemingly disparate operations that are all connected, we need to make sure that they're all working nicely together, however that looks. And then, of course, evaluating these proposals to provide that best term, long-term value for the city. This could be a 20 to a 25-year contract. And we'd like to make sure that we minimize any effects on the residential rate and also look at any potential liabilities and plan for those. So then developing this contract also to allow for to be competitive in the regional market. Competitiveness is important. We want to be sure that we are the regional landfill like we have been. And then the last piece is just as important, is to allow for a seamless implementation and transition. And depending on who that contractor is, could not be very long or it could be a while. So we've got to have plenty of time built in there. So staff is proposing contracting with New Gen Strategies and Solutions for the development of this proposal and that procurement. New Gen has worked on all manners of contracts related to landfill and solid waste for the city of Victoria. You can see here they were involved in the original one in 2007 with the addition of the compost facility in 2010 and with the gas contract. Also with the landfill expansion, New Gen was working on that, and the waste management contract that we have now in place that was completed in 2021. The transition to automated service as well in 2012. So not only do they have a lot of experience knowing the intricacies in the facilities and what's involved in our landfill, but they also have experience in lots of other landfills, which is obviously really important as well. So the scope of services in a nutshell, doing the research would be the first thing they would do, looking at regulations, what's in place now, what's working, what's not, what are future opportunities, and then of course developing that procurement package, facilitating that process, and then the last piece, as I mentioned before, that post-procurement assistance. This is just as important as those first three, because making sure we meet the benchmarks, quality control, making sure we set the rates right, operationally, we're buying the right equipment, we have a marketing plan in place. We want to make sure all of this is working nicely, and that takes a little bit of time, or it can. This gives you a broad overview of that timeline that we anticipate. The numbers on this side match up to the broad scope services. It would start with a kickoff meeting next month in December up there at the top, and then the final piece would be that implementation at the bottom so that it would be in place and ready to go by 2027. We would bring this back to council in April, May, June of 2026, so you can look at that contract before it's implemented. Next steps. We're going to bring that contract to City Council to you guys at the next meeting for New Gen, and I believe they will be here as well. And then we have that kickoff meeting in December.
I just want to add just a couple quick things. One, this was money that we did come back and talk to council about before we finalized the budget. Just a reminder on that. So the money is already set aside. It's a 3-year process. And then one quick thing, Christy did a great job. The only thing I want to draw attention to is that New Gen did not help with the landfill, but the principal that works now for New Gen was with Burns and Mack and was the lead on our landfill expansion team for 75% of that work.
Very good. Thank you all for the information. Is there any questions?
I have a question. I think I just wasn't hearing clearly enough. You talked about New Gen But I thought there was another company you talked about also before that.
Lloyd Gosling?
The one that we couldn't get, and so there was
So-
another one.
Well,
So,
that's for the attorneys.
so what's, okay, and then they sort of went to the side. I'm trying to figure out if they're in this chart somewhere.
No, ma'am. So Lloyd Gosling is who we've used in the past for all of our landfill stuff.
Right.
The issue is that when I talked to Lloyd Gosling about doing this, they are a corporate representative for Republic.
Right,
So
so
they
there
would
was-
be in direct conflict of interest by representing the city. So in talking with them and talking with Nugent and talking with others, Jackson Walker came to us highly, respected as environmental attorneys to work with, and that's why we chose them.
So they would be on the side for everything that New Gen was involved with.
Yes, ma'am. So
Okay.
Nugent will do 99% of the work with us, with the city. Well, I don't want to say that, probably 90%. The reason that we have the attorneys there, one, was to make sure that we're following all the procurement process legally. Two is when we start putting the contract together, we want to make sure that we have a good contract. When we're looking at multiple contracts, we want to make sure that there's nothing left out in between contracts. Myself, Christy, Nugent, we will work to put all that in there. We just need to make sure that we're covered legally and environmentally because we're looking at a 20 or 25 years that we're going to be under this contract. We want to make sure it's right from the start. We can't guess what's going to happen, but if there's anything out there, these environmental attorneys know about it so that we can kind of address some of those things in a small way, if nothing else,
Thank you.
before they happen. Yes, ma'am.
And Daryl, I want to ask question real quick. So just in terms of expectations, so we know that we're going to be bringing forward this contract with New Gen at our next meeting, but halfway through the presentation, you also talked about the need to address the probes.
That's a good point.
And I think you forgot to mention what's forthcoming as it relates to that.
So at the next meeting as well, and Ms. Lacy already has it, we have an amendment that we're doing with our contract with Republic Waste currently. To oversee that project, we will pay Republic Waste, who is our contractor, to oversee, hire a sub, and get this work done. They have the engineers, they have the staff that we don't, in order to oversee and make sure this is done correctly.
And our portion of that's not going to be the entire amount.
Our portion of that will be 2/3, which comes out to about $85,000.
Out of the 128.
Out of the
that you
128,
referenced.
correct. I think it's 85,333 or something like that.
And so to be clear, there'll be two items probably on consent at the next meeting, where one will be the amendment to the contract with Republic for them to take the lead in fixing the probes, where we're paying 2/3 of it. And then a separate item for the contract with New Gen to start the procurement process. So I just want to be clear with
One
those
is a
two different
budgeted
items.
item, correct. One is a budgeted item, and the other is, comes out of our post-closure fund.
And what's the time frame for the fix on the probes?
They will start, if approved by council, they will start December 1st. They'll be done by the end of December. We'll beat it by at least 3 months.
Daryl, there wasn't any TCEQ fines or anything.
There was fines on this, however, we turned in a plan to fix it. They approved the plan, we will fix it, there will be no fine.
How about?
There was a fine, but not a fine. I
Okay,
misunderstood
there you go, there you go.
Yeah, no fine,
Yeah, thank
but
you.
a fine.
Yeah, those are bad. What's the lifespan of these probes? I mean, it seems like they've been there for a long period of time.
Our issue, well, they have been, and we don't have anything in the contract that makes anybody responsible for checking them on a regular basis. And so there will be in the contracts going forward. They could last just about forever. Our problem is that we have black gumbo on top, we have clay, we have sand, we have droughts, we have floods. And the ground moves, and you're talking about a 3/4 inch piece of PVC. And so the ground can move enough to pinch it, or it can move enough to break it. And the only way that you can tell is you have to take the top off the probe and run a tool down to sound it to make sure you can reach the bottom, which is what we went out and did and found that a lot of them are clogged. Now, we may be able to fix some of those and come in a little cheaper, but we're planning to replace all of them just to make sure if need be. And then when we replace them, the old ones have to be plugged and abandoned. It's just like a water well.
Any other questions?
Me again.
Sure.
It's just because I want to clarify, and I think that I heard this correctly, but I want to be sure. We're looking for one vendor to oversee, essentially, to oversee, but we could end up again in a situation where we have multiple, like we do now, but all of those will have overlapping contracts so that there's never a potential miss.
Correct. And not necessarily looking for one vendor. We may be looking for one vendor for all three, or just two, or just one. We will figure that out as we go forward. These contracts are all going to be up about the same time. So it's hard to say. Our job is to find the best overall value for the city. That may be one, that may be three. But our job is to make sure that what we do withstands the test of time for the next 20 years minimum.
But we're bidding these contracts simultaneously?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
So it'll be a bid with alternates.
Okay. Got it. Anything else?
No, sir.
All right.
Thank you
for the information. Appreciate it.
So I'll move on to the second item, if that's all right, Mayor.
Yes, please do.
I'll allow Wesley to introduce this topic, and I'll interject if he misses anything. But this is the beginning of our conversation on reviewing our fees, basically. And I'll let Wesley talk more about it.
All right. Well, good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, we're going to kick off our presentations on our proposed fee changes and the new master fee schedule. I'll go over a brief background of the fees we're going to talk about, what to expect in the master fee schedule, the methodology used to update the fees, each fund that's impacted by these changes, and an implementation timeline. The fees included in this process are outlined in Chapter 24 of the City Code. These fees are updated periodically via ordinance, typically around the budget process. Staff's been reviewing their applicable fees and updating them, which will then be used in development of a master fee schedule. Currently, the city does not have a standalone document for all city fees. This document will take the information in Chapter 24 and put it into a consistent format for ease of use. As part of this exercise, we will not be updating any of the water, wastewater, or environmental services fee that you see on your utility bill. We'll be doing separate rate studies for those at a later date to update those. So this process, we started in May with the creation of a worksheet that included all the fees in Chapter 24 that could be filtered by applicable department that they could work with in reviewing their fees and making proposed changes. The proposed changes are going to be based on a variety of factors, including market comparison, inflation, and cost recovery. Some of the fees that you'll be seeing have not been updated since prior to COVID, and some even farther back than that. And as you know, we've experienced a significant amount of inflation in costs related to materials as well as labor that we need to catch up with. The funds impacted by these proposed changes include the general fund, community center fund, and water fund. None of the changes that are going to be presented were factored into development of the fiscal 25 budget. For the implementation timeline, tonight we're at the point of making the department presentations, which we'll have 2 tonight for Public Works and Development Services. And the next meeting, we plan to present the Parks and Recreation and Main Street fees. We would then bring back an ordinance in December with the proposed changes and a draft of the master fee schedule, and plan to implement in January of 2025 if approved. So, unless there's any questions for me, I'll turn it over to Ken to go over Public Works fees. Did I miss anything?
And I'll just briefly, as Ken comes up, add that, obviously, because the increase of these fees weren't taken into account in the adoption of the fiscal year 25 budget, it's 100% council's prerogative to take this at the pace that you feel comfortable with. it will feel like it's a lot of information because we have quite a bit of fees. And so by no means do we want to come across as putting pressure on you to get to a point of, yes, we got to get this done. We just think that for ease of implementation, it just rolls off the tongue easier to say that these fees will go into effect in January. But again, we can take it at the pace that you feel comfortable with. And please feel free to ask questions because it will be and it will feel like a lot of new information, especially for our new council members that maybe haven't been accustomed to seeing some of the fees that we assess. And that should read water and wastewater fees, not rates.
True. Thank you. I'm going to go over the fee changes for public works and for water and wastewater. And give you some background. These fees, a lot of the fees that we've had in public works and primarily water and wastewater have remained unchanged since 2019, some 2014, and some as far back as 2009. During that time, building development was kind of low, so we didn't see real need to change. There wasn't a lot of inflation, and we were keeping up with the costs of the materials and the fees that we were charging. So what is driving the fee changes now in public works? It's to recover the cost of service. That's our main focus on updating our fees. Is we've got, of course, increase in chemicals, both in the water plant, the wastewater plant, and other items. Those are increasing, and we need to keep up with those chemical costs, thus increasing fees. Raw materials. A good example of increasing costs of raw materials is in a water meter, there's a lot of brass, a lot of fittings. That has gone up exponentially since 2020. And all we're trying to do is just recover those costs. And then, of course, fuel costs have gone up since 2014 and 29. We've got new regulations, TCEQ, always putting new regulations on us. We got to capture some of those costs where we have to change some of those materials to meet their needs. Labor, of course, both going up and availability, and then equipment costs. And then why now? As Wesley mentioned, we're reviewing the city's utility rate structure, not the fee structure, but we are doing a rate structure with New Gen. The standard city services that we have, we want to reduce to cover the costs. And some of that is an example of routine inspections. We've all heard about the issues we have with grease traps in restaurants. Our goal is if we can get to the owners of those places and talk to them, routinely inspect them, guide them, then we can reduce their costs. And I'll get into that a little bit more. But it's keeping us out there in the public to help. In-house meter replacement. Right now, we would love to get our crews out there to change more meters, change the batteries, get us back on track as far as the meters that are not reading. Encourage water conservation. I'll keep preaching that for as long as I'm up here. And the objective, again, is to cover the cost of service to the customer. These are some of our fees that I just want to go over briefly. We have a lot more, but these are some that I know council has seen, the citizens have seen. Section of the code, description, the current cost, unit, and then last updated and a proposed change. The first four are lines, pre-stubbed water lines that go to your lot. They're already there, they're in place. Those would be primarily like a subdivision that got put in. The developer would put that pre-stub line in. There's a box there. All they have to do, we have to do is set a meter. No change for the 3/4 inch. A little bit of increase for the 1 inch, that's primarily for the meter cost and the MXUs. And same with the 1.5 and 2 inch. The next ones are when they're not pre-stubbed. That's where the city has to go in, or contractor, if we have to, is put in a tap on the main line, run it across the street, and put a meter box in and all the connections to that house. Those costs have gone up substantially since 2019. And it's primarily materials. Again, the cost of the meters, they're just a meter in MXU is $400. So that's primarily the big change on those. The next one that I wanted to highlight is temporary water service coming from a hydrant. We have a lot of those. A lot of companies use hydrants to use water for construction. Right now, we're charging $125 to set that meter. A lot more time involved than just that. So we want to up those costs. And the same thing with moving them. One thing I'll note is if it's a city contract, if it's a city project, we have no charge. That's just, we don't do that. That's just double dipping. So we don't do that one.
Mr. Gill, let me ask you a question real quick. If you go back,
Bottom button. Thank you.
so the numbers we see here on the proposed change, walk me through how we came up with those numbers. I mean, what was the process to do that?
The process on these is we went through on, for instance, the lines that are not pre-stubbed and the other ones, our utilities manager went through and literally priced out what it would cost to tap that line, how much that service saddle would cost, how much time it would take, how much digging it's going to take. He figured everything down to the meter nuts. And I mean, we have a breakdown if you'd like to see those. And it also includes, we got to remember, street repairs. So a lot of these they're an average cost because there is short side and long side. And so we have to average those costs. But that's how we figured those.
Okay. Thank you.
How frequently do we see these types of charges?
How many,
How
excuse me?
frequently do we see this type of cost increment on our end?
On the
Where now we're proposing the change?
as far as,
So there's the current cost, I worded it incorrectly, I apologize. So there's the current cost, and then there's the proposed change. How frequently are we seeing these fees charged on these current costs, especially for these higher amounts?
it's the current fees, right now, we don't have, I'll be honest, we don't have a lot of, applicants applying for lines that aren't pre-stubbed. We really don't. It's very minimal. Those are going to be lots internal inside the city that somebody may subdivide and say, oh, I need a tap. The other one would be is a sprinkler line. In other words, a lot of people want an individual sprinkler line, not tied to their house, because you have those certain months where your sewer bill could be affected by water consumption. So yes, some of these will be for a sprinkler line, and typically that's a 1-inch service. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Some of the other the next ones I'll go through is the wastewater connection. That's another one that's already contractor puts in. It's pre-stubbed. Right now, we're charging $100 to set up the account through utility billing office, and we want to go up to $200. That's primarily it is setting up the account, but it's also a lot of times our utility crews, when they go out there, they got to make sure that when that contractor put that line in and stubbed out the line from the clean out, that he didn't tie it in to the clean out top, he tied it into the bottom of the line. We found that several times, so we sometimes go out there and have to dig that line up, the service, or inspect it visually. The other one is not pre-stubbed. Again, that would be for a new lot or a subdivided lot, and we're just recovering those costs. We install a clean out and a box around every new line we put in, and we used to put a double service, but now it's a single service per lot. The next ones I want to get to is turn on service to a new account. And that sounds simple, and it relatively is, and that would be if you've got a house and you just want to, you're moving out, and the tenant keeps the meter, and he says, I want to keep the meter, I just want to change service to a new name. This also is a big one regarding non-payment. We have 200 to 300 non-payment turn-offs and turn-ons weekly. And just imagine 3 people trying to do that, along with their other job of updating the meters, fixing the MXUs. They're running around literally daily, turning meters off, and then right after they turn them off, we get the phone call, hey, I made a payment, turn it back on. So they got to go right back out there. We want to increase this, not as a penalty, but to encourage people, pay your bill, and this wouldn't happen. But it's important, I think, that we try as our best to encourage the people, the citizens and customers, go ahead and pay, and keep up with it. But we're not going up substantially. A given example is the electric company. If they turn your electricity off, it's $100 to turn it back on, and there's no time frame. They get to it when they get to it.
How static is that number? I mean, if you're talking about several hundred a week over the last 5 years, has that number grown?
It's grown. It's grown, and it continues to grow. It's amazing how many it's been 200 to 300, and utility billing, I've talked to them extensively, and they said it's possible, we're seeing it inch up for some reason. And we're just, like I said, our big push is this, reduce our staff time so they can get other work done and maintenance on the meters.
But additionally, according to your chart, this rate hasn't changed in 15 years.
That's correct.
It's a long time.
Yes. The other ones are lock fees. Some of them are associated with the same thing. We don't have a lot of those, but they do occur. And some of the last sections I'll go over is in industrial waste. And we want to go up on some of these, the permitting, and we have 8, I'm going to be sure I got this right. We have 8 industrial minor permits in town and 6 significant. So there's not a lot of companies out there. We do not permit and don't charge for grease traps restaurants. I know that would be a question, but we don't charge in that part of the ordinance. One thing we would like to change in our proposal is the industrial wastewater surcharge. This is one where it's based on the BOD and the TSS, which is biological oxygen demand and total suspended solids in your wastewater stream. And it can be everything from a restaurant to Starbucks, which is amazingly, their surcharge is very high, to not a coffee shop, but a smoothie shop. Everybody has fats and greases, and a good example of that is when you go down to the food aisle and you want to fry fish, you get vegetable oil. So that's our encouragement is we want to increase this, not again as a penalty, but to recover our costs, because all that extra the greases, fats, and oils that get into our sewer system, we have to clean the lines. We got odor controls we have to do, clean the lift stations. The chemical costs to treat at the wastewater plant in 2022 was $270,000. Now we're at $500,000, and it's just a recovery cost. And I'll entertain any questions. I know it's a lot, and that's, again, city manager mentioned this is something to go over at time, and we'll answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Gill?
No, but
No, thank you.
I think it's important that everybody realize if you look at those dates, like Jan brought up, some of these haven't been changed since 2009.
Been a while.
Yes, and then we appreciate you taking care of it.
Thank you.
It was very shocking earlier when we looked at and approved the cost of the chemicals used.
Yes.
And the percentage that it increased was very shocking, so I
It's
understand
Chlorine since 2020 has gone from 600 a ton to 2,000. And it's like there's two companies that have a market.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Gill.
As Julie comes up, ultimately, we're obviously going to be looking for, head nod okay from you to bring forward these changes in actual ordinance format, right? And so we'll find a way to really get that input just to confirm and clarify that you're okay with what we're recommending, or if there's some that you want to take a deeper dive in, we're happy to do that. But it's a lot of fees. And so it would be challenging to take a very specific deep dive into every single one of them. But as you can tell by Ken's presentation, a lot of them are very similar. While it might seem like it's a lot, they're cut from the same vein. And so it's just something to keep in mind as you yourself process through the proposed changes.
So good evening. I'm sorry, I didn't realize I could juice up the presentation or the blank template that Wesley sent, so it's a little dry. But development services fees are collected when permits are issued. The fees collected are used to offset our development center operations. They are general fund revenue, and then of course the development center is also funded through the general fund. We call that fund center, development center is 01 INS. So our current fees have really not been wholesale looked at since 2014. We've tweaked a few fees here and there. Our last fee increase, or it wasn't even really an increase, but a change was in 2019 as a result of House Bill 852, which prohibited fee schedules to be based off of permit values. And so we switched to the square footage method for our residential permit fees. And so again, that was really just a change in how we calculated the fees, but our goal was to basically collect the same revenue whenever we did that. The internal policy, as it was described to me way back when I started in 2014 from previous administration, was to capture a minimum of 70% of expenses. I'm happy to revisit that with other direction if y'all want. Cities all look at building permit fees or development services fees differently. Some cities want to capture 100% of the cost of the development center operations. Other cities look at it as more as an economic development tool to have low fees and to facilitate development. I would say that we're a little bit more in the middle in that we never waive fees. If we charge a fee, we collect it. They're rarely, if ever, waived. The only time we really waive fees is in response to disasters, natural disasters. But our fees are pretty, I don't want to say low, but moderate. They're not aggressive at all. So in this change, the only thing that we really completely revamped was our commercial MEP schedule. I don't know how long that typo has been in, and I'll show you in a subsequent slide, but they're ridiculous, and they are not. Actually was built into our permitting software, but even in our permitting software, former Mayor Bachnight used to always complain about our MEP fees were too high, and Rick and I just always question, I don't know what he's talking about. But when we really delved into it, whenever there's, the fee schedules all build upon each other, so the higher permit values, sometimes there's higher fees associated. When you got into those very upper levels of expensive or high-valued permits, the fees did get out of whack. So we have completely looked at our MEP fees, and again, I'll show you that. Rick also reached out to the executive directors of the Associated Builders and Contractors, which is our commercial building association, and then Crossroads Builder Association, the residential builder association, of these proposed fee increases, and didn't really receive any feedback. And I think it's because it's been a really long time coming. We haven't really aggressively updated fees in a very long time. So ignore all these numbers. I really just put them on the screen to show you. We have, actually I only showed 10 years, but we have 20 years of history of how we're looking at that 70%. So, and again, this is all open to different direction, but what we've always looked at is our development center operations. Of course, that's not the only fund center and development services. We also have our planning budget. And of course, planning is also very intimately involved in the development process. But we've only ever looked at the O1 INS fund. And so you see, all the different line items with payroll, of course, being the most expensive, and our total expenses year over year. And then our revenue side, which I didn't show, it's on a different sheet on this Excel, and I'd be happy to email you the Excel. Like I said, it goes all the way back to 2005 if you're interested. On the revenue side, we include not just planning fees or building permit fees, but we also include planning fees. So fees for preliminary plats, final plats, variances. So it's not necessarily an apples to apples, but I've just continued to do, like I said, the analysis that they've done since 2005. Right before I came in 2014, 10 years ago, there had been a big push to do a huge increase or look at fees. You talked to Rick about fees, and he's got a little bit of scars on him. There used to be, I think, major complaints if we just went up $5. And so you'll see that in the year-over-year analysis that I'll show you next. But in 2013, there was a big push to update fees. So you'll see that we captured almost 100% of our cost in 2014. And that's kind of fluctuated over the years, with that 70% being the threshold. You'll see we dipped below 70% in 2016, and that's when we didn't have a director. The previous director had retired. John Kaminsky was interim. I was appointed director at the end of that fiscal year in July, and then, of course, Hurricane Harvey hit. So you see in fiscal year 2018, so 2016 it dipped, we would have looked at it in 2017, and then, of course, Harvey hit right in beginning of fiscal year 2018 or August, and then, of course, October was the new fiscal year. So you can see our huge increase in revenue in 2018. If we had if we were capturing 130% of our cost year over year, I would be coming and asking for more staff. That would not be sustainable with the amount of work that is associated with all of those permits being issued. And so additional staff would, of course, then incur more costs, and you would see that dip again. So that's just kind of an overview of kind of what our fees look like. And so that's that percentage. You can see back in the early part of the early 2000s, we were collecting very little of our actual expenses. So these are the actual proposed changes that I'm proposing, and I did leave on the dais in front of each of you the current format. I know Wesley's changing it into a big master schedule, but I do think it's a little easier to follow along if you want to. But we have a really big issue, of course, with people working without permits or working without a contractor's license. So our biggest increases are really to try and curb that kind of behavior. So we want to increase our investigation and working without license fees. If you are a contractor and you're just working without a license, it just goes from $100 to $200. But a lot of times, what we find is someone working without a license also does not have a contractor's license, because you cannot get a permit if you don't have a contractor's license. So collectively, that would be a $500 hit to hopefully discourage that sort of behavior. Plan review fees. We're not proposing to change the amount, but we are proposing to limit how many times red lines can come through until we collect another fee. And this just discourages, again, the bad actors that don't pay attention to the detailed list of red lines that are given to them on the first or second rounds of review. On residential permits, we are proposing on the fee schedule to increase the base fees by $20 to $100. Manufactured home on individual lots from $120 to $200, and a lot of that has to do because when it's on an individual lot, we're having to check setbacks and driveways and site work in a way that you don't have to do in a home, and it's a lot more like a single family, stick-built type residential structure, and so it's just the amount of work that's involved. We are proposing to increase our commercial building fee bases by $80. and then the commercial MEP permits, you'll see that the permit is $80 or 60% evaluation, whichever is greater. So on a $1,000 permit, or a value of a job that's a value of $1,000 is a $600 permit, and we don't even charge that. We've completely not followed our MEP. We've just been using what's built into our InterGov system, and of course we are moving over to My Government Online, hopefully by the end of the year. I would like to just build in this new fee schedule that looks like this. So this would be for the building systems permits, your mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and gas fees. And it's based off of course, evaluation of the job.
And this was the fee that there was some kind of weird anomaly in the
Once you-
equation, correct?
In our permitting software, which is what we actually use the fees, because this fee is really high. We'd be funding the whole city if we actually charged, I think, what's in the actual code of ordinances. But what's built into our permitting software, once you get to the 100,000 plus values, there's a different multiplier that makes those fees really high. And so we've settled it with this proposed fee structure.
So this addresses that and fixes that issue?
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Billboard location review install fees are going up a little bit. Honestly, with the UDO, hopefully there's no really a lot of locations left to put billboards, so we're not really seeing a lot of those applications come in. The floodplain information, name, tenant, demo, all this is kind of related to how much work it goes into processing those types of requests. A license to encroach, we're doing more and more. It was silent in our ordinance. It actually is explained, or there's a process in our new UDO, and that's when you have a sign projecting maybe over the right-of-way in downtown. It's really used a lot in downtown. But we did those for free, and we just captured the filing fees. But we do have to write one individually and then send it to legal for review and approval, so we're proposing a fee of $100 for that. And then the other types of fees are going up nominally. And then our variance request, hopefully we'll see a lot less variances with the UDO, but we are proposing to increase that fee from $190 to $250. There's a lot of work associated with variances. And then the notification fee is a pass-through fee. We actually have to notify for each variance are a lot of different types of requests in the advocate, and that's tied into state law, and the advocate fees are increasing. So when we do an individual request, the advocate, they may charge us $100, they may charge us $125, sometimes it may be $175, but that $150 really kind of captures what we're spending. With our new UDO, we now have a site modification permit, which of course we didn't have before. So we're tying that and just changing an amending site plan to, you can either have an amending site plan or a site modification permit and charging the same amount of money for that. And then we had actual cost of printing for geographic information systems. It's kind of antiquated. We don't actually ever receive any requests anymore to print. So if we do receive a request, we'll just calculate, kind of like open records request, and calculate the actual cost of whatever that job would be at that time and then charge the actual cost. And that's Development Services proposed fees. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
Julie? With these proposed fees, have you plugged them into the previous year or any kind of historical values of what we've done and see what kind of recoupment percentage would be?
No, because it's very difficult to really, actually Wesley and I had talks about how hard it is to project what your fees would be, because every year the amount of permits we have is very similar, but the types of permits change greatly. 1 year we may have a lot of single-family residential, and then the next year are commercial building permits, and their values may be really high. And so, but if you look at what we've done historically in 2014 and 2018, as far as increasing our residential permits, when we changed the base of those to $80, it was about a 10 to 15% increase in the cost that we recover, which is what we've been measuring historically. So that's what I would propose or expect with this proposed fee structure.
Was, I
Anybody else have a
That was
question?
mine too.
So in
Let me
terms
steal your
of,
thunder.
in terms of, you made a comment about that our fees currently aren't aggressive. Did we, in putting these kind of proposed fees together, did we look at other fees in other cities? You always want to remain competitive in development and make sure that
Yes.
we're not
So
pricing
yes,
ourselves out of a market, so to speak.
these proposed fees maintain that lack of aggressiveness. But yes, we have looked at others, and I also have used my knowledge of working in 3 other cities too. And so there's a lot of variation out there in how cities collect fees, and I'd be happy to look at any one city, but this definitely is more on the mild side of pushing us forward, and that's what I'm saying. I'd be happy to go with a different direction. Like I said, I think there's been some long scars in the office that have kind of healed because we haven't really done anything with fees in a really long time. So that 70% has always been the goal, to capture that, and we've been capturing that. But it's also hard to really project because year over year, you don't know what type of fees. If we get a lot of large public buildings, $75 million type buildings or apartment complexes, those fees, the values of those are so high that therefore the fees are really high, and that kind of can throw out or really be an anomaly in that year versus a whole bunch of single-family residential fees. So
And was the goal on the proposed fees to basically capture actually what our, more in line with what we're actually spending, what it's actually costing us versus just a number, I guess?
yes, so we looked at it because it dipped below the 70%, but when Rick and I were going through is what actually entails as far as the amount of work that we're doing in relation to what we used to do, and that's where you saw the $80 increases in commercial because of the different steps we have to do with, making sure they're registered with TAS or, calling the state on asbestos surveys or that type of work, and how much more we're having to do these days because of different laws or processes. And that's how we looked at each individual fee and proposed the increase that way.
Okay, good. Thank you for the information. Any other questions?
I think you said this, but there wasn't ever an indicator for the 70%. You just kind of inherited that, right?
Yes.
So it's not something that would have to be followed moving
That's
forward.
what I'm saying. We can, if we want to capture closer to 100%, we of course can, but I would, if you want to give me that direction, I would definitely propose we do it over several years rather than all at once.
I think certainly we have to keep in mind, I guess back to my comment that, we want to encourage development. We talked about growth here recently. We talked about how do we encourage those sort of things, and fees are the sort of thing that turns off developers. And I think we want to certainly be able to justify the work that we do to cover our costs there, but we want to make sure that we're falling within a reasonable range. My opinion.
And I'll interject there, Mayor, if you don't mind, because we absolutely want to be development friendly with our fees, but there's a big difference between the fees that we're talking about now and things that developers typically take a big hit on, which are an impact fees, which we don't have. And so when we do have developers that are looking to develop in Victoria, regardless of what these fees are, it's a huge benefit for them to develop in Victoria because most every other community has impact fees, which we don't have at all. And basically what impact fees are assesses that particular business's impact on our wastewater system, on our water system, the drainage, et cetera. And cities come up with a formula to determine what's that impact and what's their pro rata share of contributing to that improvement. And that's where it can get into the thousands, into the millions for large projects. And so I would just caution us to keep in mind that the particular fees that we're referring to are more on the mundane day-to-day running of things and aren't necessarily the items that trigger the red flags for developers, because those fees we don't even have.
And I'd like to add to that. I remember not too long ago, well, I guess 5 years ago, when we looked at fees before, I've always been impressed that the attitude is not, this is an income production type of a fee, but it's, we just want to recover our costs, or at least recover a reasonable part of them. And that is what the presentation's been from both of them today. So, yeah, contrast that with the impact fees that we don't have.
I agree. I was looking at it more from a perspective of them not feeling pressure to hit a certain number when they're looking at fees, to take that off the table and really look at the fees in the way that you said, Duane, what's an appropriate fee for each individual thing versus are we hitting a marker of 70% or whatever that percent would be, kind of taking that pressure off of you and that team to have that, because you said there was a year that it dipped below that when you came on board, and it was like, oh no, you know.
Well, no, it did dip.
And then when
we
above that,
didn't look at it because Hurricane Harvey hit.
and then Harvey, right?
Yeah,
Right.
so that's why no fees were proposed that year, because it was like, oh, we need to look at this. Oh no, now there's a hurricane.
And one of the other things, if I may really quickly, because I think it's important, because when fees came up as part of our budget development conversation in the summer, specifically when we were talking about, compensation and limited funds, I know that many of our own employees and maybe even some of you had and wondered, well, if we did tackle fees, how much money would that generate overall, right? And so as an example, in fiscal year 25, our general fund, $61 million. The fees that our general fund is budgeted to receive in fiscal year 25 is basically like $1.2 million. And so it's a very small part of our general fund. And so if we collect an extra, even just 10% above that, it's really only an extra $150,000, right? So it's not increasing these fees is not necessarily moving the needle to get us that additional millions of dollars that we might need to do something significant. And I just want to be clear with that, to manage expectations and to just be transparent with truly how minimal basically the fees make up our revenue for our general fund.
I mean, it's obvious it costs us more to do what we've always done. And so I think this is a reflection of that, so. Well, thank you, Ms. Vogel. Appreciate it. Anything else on city manager reports, Mr. Garza?
No, sir, we do have an executive session though.
Okay, then let's take a 5-minute break. It is 6:41, and we will reconvene into executive session after the break.
City Council recess for executive session on the 5th day of November 2024 at 6:41 p.m. Subject matter is as follows: Texas Government Code 551.087, 551.072, and 551.071.